think of putting yourself in your program, your center stage. And it's not just a scene, and it's not just saying I, here and there. That's not what I'm meaning. And I gave him the example, and I think it's a good one, from a long time ago. A colleague of mine dressed up as a homeless person and stayed out in the streets of a city. And what it was like to be a homeless person. This was I think it was a 1-hour program actually, maybe 30 minutes, I'm not sure. Anyway, I didn't find it terribly insightful. I did not find I was surprised. And I found that the ending where this particular person says, and now I'm going to go back to my lovely 2-bedroom and warm apartment, I don't know. I had a problem with that. And I think it's probably less to do with that she said, well, I'm going to see what it's like to be a homeless person, but I didn't find the treatment or what I learned or what I took away from it, or if it was compelling or not. I just didn't find that. And I think that is a danger. Now, she certainly was, center stage in that. So it's probably more about what I take away from it. So to me, it felt self-indulgent, and I didn't really take an awful lot away. So if you fast forward the tape, when I was talking still to Greg and saying, I don't do this, and I said, now that I think about it, I did do a 1-hour show called Joyce's Story, where I went around to various food banks in Toronto, and I wanted to tell the story and live with, for a week, this single mother. She has 2 children, Joyce. I met up with her. We connected right away. And, so it wasn't, there was certainly the dynamic between Joyce and me was really interesting. Here I was, this middle class, well-paid, or used to be, CBC documentary producer, and I really know nothing about Joyce's life. The very first scene, she opens the door, and I said to her, you got a baseball bat inside the door. You obviously don't play baseball, I'm thinking, right? So this is her weapon, of choice. And there was very interesting sort of intersections between Joyce and I. I mean, one in particular was kind of late at night, and I was taping her, and it's a really sensitive subject. She has 2 children by different fathers. The dads aren't in the picture, and I kind of waded into this territory. And at one point I said, Joyce, we were talking about, do the children know their fathers, or do they ever see them? And she answered that question, but I could feel her getting a little bit uptight. And then I said, well, were you ever in love with these men, the fathers of these children? And Joyce looked at me and said, were you always in love with every man you fucked? And I thought, oh my God, right? And I said in a little voice, no. And I really thought about, keeping that in the program. I did at the end of the day, because this obviously was Joyce's story, but this was also really about our dynamic. And she was responding, and I think that was fairly evident to me, about kind of judgment and, sexual shame, and that she'd been probably asked these questions before, and if she hadn't been asked them, she felt them anyway. So that's why I think it was really important to leave that dynamic in there, I'm just thinking about, some other ones as well. This one is more mixed. It's a program that I did with Canada's unknown serial killer, the psychopathic serial killer. I was doing a 3-hour program for Ideas called Creating Conscience. And I'd interviewed this criminal lawyer in Toronto, Paul Burstein, and about another subject. And at the end of it, he said to me, Mary, do you want an interview with a serial killer? He's never been interviewed before, yeah. And I said, no. I said, I'm a feminist. I'm not, what would I do with that program? And I said, what's the deal with this guy? His name is Russell Johnson. And he went on this kind of terrorizing path in the 1970s. He confessed to 10 murders, but the police believe he murdered 17 women and confessed to 10 rapes. And so I just said no. I'm not interested, and I wasn't really sure why. I just thought, I don't know what I can bring to this, really. Other than it's spectacle, it's sensational, it's gruesome, it's dreadful. Don't we already know that stuff? And maybe I wasn't a careerist. Maybe another journalist, well, wow, it's the first time he's been spoken to, but I just don't really gravitate towards that either. And so then about 8 months later, I phoned up Paul Burstein, this criminal lawyer, and I said, I've changed my mind. I would like to interview Russell Johnson. And he said, well, can you leave a voicemail message as to why you've changed your mind and why you want to do this? And I said, sure. And I did that. And unbeknownst to me, Paul forwarded the voicemail to Russell Johnson, this killer, who then could decide on his own. And he said yes, based on, he said, which I don't know if that's a compliment, but said that he felt that I was genuine. And that I think the interpretation, I think what really was happening was this is a guy that wanted to be transferred from maximum security in Oak Ridges and Penetanguishene to a medium security facility. And so anyway, the very first thing, and then he had to go through this Ontario Review Board hearing, so he wanted to look like he was together so he could get the transfer. So anyway, I went up to interview, Russell Johnson. Of course, I can't do a pre-interview. And, it was this cafeteria lounge. There were like pedophiles, rapists, killers, and they were kind of all around as well. I thought I would be in a separate room with him, and maybe there would be a guard. But I think there were a couple of guards like through a two-way, what's that called, a two-way mirror or something, about 50 feet away. But I think something that happened initially should have been in the program. And my editor said no. I was not sure. This is like we're going back 16 years ago or so. And so what happened was I chatted with him like an icebreaker with his psychopath. And then, I took out the tape recorder, obviously, and the microphone. And he's a big guy. He's 6'3", 250 pounds. I'm 5'1" or 2", so I'm going to be like the kid here, We're at this table, I think we're sort of kitty corner. And so I took it out and I, got everything ready and I went like this, and he went, whoa, you're not pointing that weapon at me. And I just kind of froze and I thought, well, I said, wait a minute, but I have to tape this. How did you think I would be doing this? And he said, no, there's no way. You cannot wave that thing in my face because this is all about control, right? It's about power. And one thing we know is that psychopaths are, acutely sensitive to issues of power. And I just found the whole thing kind of ironic. And we got into an argument. I said, well, I can't really not tape this. I'm like getting really mad. And he says, well, I can hold the microphone. I said, no, you can't. I said, because you might start drumming your fingertips on the mic because people do that. You're not a professional. Then it won't be on-air quality. And then we can't do this show. And we're kind of like going back and forth. And I said, well, wait a minute. Maybe I've got a tripod. What about that, Russell? Like I'll put it there. And tripods are horrible. People move away. It's the worst kind of quality, right? You never want to do that unless it's like a panel. But even I move too. And he was like, fine. And I was horrified. I took out this tripod and it was broken. And because he's this kind of really paranoid, like crazed guy around, power, thought I had done that deliberately. And I said, that's it. I said, I'm leaving, as if he's going to be mad about that. And then he's like, well, come back tomorrow. And I said, okay. And so I came back the next day. I had, a functioning tripod, but also because he's so tall and there's these dipshit little tripods. But I think that exchange was incredibly interesting. It was the very first thing. It should absolutely, and it wasn't about me saying, oh no, I didn't want it in, or it was, embarrassing or anything like that. But my editor said no. And I just thought it would be a really interesting way to start out because it actually really wasn't about me. It's offering this insight into psychopathy. And I went right back to the meaning of the word 200 years ago. This was a study of psychopathy, not just Russell Johnson, And so anyway, that was the story. Another part of it that I decided to leave out, which I don't think was very insightful, and I think it was the right decision, I was really disturbed and upset and fearful before I went in to Oak Ridges. But why would I say that? Like, I don't find that particularly interesting, that especially a female, journalist, documentary producer. And also I'm thinking, what about his victims? I'm sure they were kind of scared when they were in the throes of, these attacks, right? I mean, so in that case, I thought, no, would definitely be, actually, I think in bad taste, quite frankly. So anyway, we're going to hear, just to give you a sense, it's not great quality because of this problem with the tripod. And also Russell Johnson, because he wasn't caught for so long, he cleaned up the crime scenes. He did people's the women's laundry, just everything. He positioned women sleeping with the novel back on their chest. And he was really, but he had also learned to become a psychiatrist himself. And so, because he was studied by Scotland Yard, he was studied by everyone, so he spoke in a very soft voice. So it was, I think it should be reasonably okay to understand.
Donna Velboom had been strangled. She'd been sexually assaulted after death, then mutilated. In our corner of the visitors' lounge, in much the same way that he describes his other crimes, Russell Johnson talks about how he was paralyzed with fear while attacking Donna.
So I went into the apartment and I sat beside the end of the bed, and I can remember thinking different things. And while she was sleeping, I thought, there's no way that I'm going to make any noise whatsoever. And if I make any noise, the least bit of noise at all, I'm not going to panic. As I was sitting by the end of the bed, she got up. I thought, she's going to see me. She's going to start screaming. So I sat there. I kind of froze. And I thought, there's no way. She went over and turned off a fan.
Turned off the fan?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then she came back and she laid down in the bed and she hadn't seen me sitting at the end of the bed. Maybe she wasn't looking in that direction. I don't know. So I figured, well, if I got to wait till she gets asleep, I'd try and get out of here, right? So I try to move and I'm all stiff and cramped. And as I started to get up, she wakes. She starts, who are you? What's going on? Starts to scream.
She starts saying, who are you?
Who is this? What are you doing there?
So she was shouting it or screaming, not talking.
Yeah, and so I jumped on her and I started to strangle her. And as I was sitting on her, I was saying to myself, how long? How long do I hold her? I was afraid to hold too long. She might die like the other person's died.
Why couldn't you just put a hand over her mouth to stop her and screaming?
Then how do I get away? And I was afraid, and what am I going to do if she does die, And
yeah. So even in that piece, you can hear it's about him kind of being like very self-referential. How do I get away? I thought it was interesting when he said I got off the bed. I was all cramped up, and so it's all this stuff about Russell Johnson. And anyway, it was I guess it was a very disturbing, obviously a disturbing program to do. But the other aspects of it was how psychiatry is battled with the psychopath. If what he did in the 70s, psychiatrists were still into this idea, and I talked to them and they said, we lost. We believe that psychopaths could be given a conscience, could be given therapy, could be fixed, they could be cured. And Russell Johnson really was the end of that era of psychiatry. After 200 years, they said, it's not possible. It literally is not possible. So he's in an institute for the criminally insane. Today he would obviously be in Kingston. And he's still trying to get transferred to a medium security institute for the criminally insane. So I just hope that he doesn't. He started phoning me after this piece on some unknown number kind of calling system that I had to get him to stop. So also with a piece like this, it's so fraught. It is so difficult that I also didn't, other than the questions, because he's so evasive and all of that, I didn't want to put a lot of myself into it because the relatives were, their stories are dramatic and all of that as well. Oh God, okay, so I'm going to show you another piece. I'm going to run another piece very quickly. I did a documentary called Buffy World about the phenomenon of Buffy the Vampire Slayer that all the academics in North America that are into this kind of thing, Buffy the Vampire Slayer became part of the academic world, the curriculum. And so my editor said, I want you to write an essay off the top. You've been in love with women warriors since you were a child. I said, no, I don't want to, because so many people are, not just me, it's not about me. And then I said, well, let me think about it. So this is a little essay. It's all about me.
I was just 10 years old when I caught my first glimpse of a woman warrior, Emma Peel of the Avengers. Emma could shoot the cork off a champagne bottle by firing her little gold revolver from 50 feet away. In the 1960s British television show, she was part secret agent, part femme fatale. Complete in leather pants or a catsuit, Emma could swing a sword or deliver a fatal karate chop. But over time, I felt my disappointment grow. Emma was often rescued by her partner, Steed. Emma Peel would start looking positively quaint with the advent of new heroines in the 1970s. There was Wonder Woman and the tricks she performed with her magic lasso. But I thought she seemed a little too pretty, and I wondered how powerful could she really be, imprisoned in what seemed to be a metal bustier. The Bionic Woman could run 60 miles per hour, with her bionic legs, of course. But how embarrassing. The Bionic Woman was made to carry a photo in her wallet of her boyfriend, Steve Austin. He had his own show called The $6 Million Man.
Once upon a time, there were 3 little girls who went to the police academy.
And then, of course, there was Charlie's Angels. Kelly, Sabrina, and Jill were a crime-fighting trio whom I thought were pretty cool. I didn't even mind Farrah's hair. But their boss annoyed me, a wealthy bachelor named Charlie who handed the Angels their assignments. He was an invisible male presence who would only communicate by speakerphone.
You heard that, Charlie?
Everything, Sabrina. And I've already made arrangements for you 3 to go to prison.
Prison? You've got to be kidding, Charlie.
Over time, more woman warriors would punch and kick their way onto the screen, and gradually, bigger biceps would deliver as much eye candy as bulging cleavage. Women were becoming more warrior than sex symbol. But there was something cardboard cutout-ish about all of them. They had no emotional life. Not until 1997 did those of us waiting for a true woman warrior to emerge finally sit up and really take notice. It was Buffy, the Vampire Slayer.
The basis of the show is this central metaphor, which is high school is hell. Adolescence is facing the worst kinds of demons that you can face, and any girl who makes it through that is a superhero.
So anyway, that was that was my Buffy essay. That was certainly first person. There are others, and so I'm certainly nuanced about what works and what doesn't. And just one other aspect of this that we don't often have to consider, but that's the idea that the kind of safety of it as well. Like I'm doing a 2-hour program for Ideas in the fall about hallucinogens, LSD, acid, huge rebirth, and not just for medicinal reasons, but for spiritual reasons, the spiritual journey. Okay, so, I did acid a couple of times. Do I put that in the program when Stephen Harper is still, conservatives would say, what? And I noticed that, the Atlantic, a couple of these big, pieces have come out on this. The writers never talk about any of their own experience, and I did kind of wonder about that. What are you going to do? I don't know. It's going to be called High Culture.